Imagine that we need $1 million to be happy. If that's the case, then, as long as we don't reach this amount, we're unhappy. If we look at humanity's poverty and its small percentage of millionaires, we can conclude that happiness is scarce if it requires 7 figures in a bank account. Now, let's say that we deeply desire to be happy and feel incomplete as long as we don't reach this mental state. So far, we've managed to save $100,000, which might be a lot of money to most of us, but if we take the requirement of happiness we set for ourselves into account, we are $900,000 in debt. It's not comfortable to be in debt, as it weighs heavily on our shoulders and implies a state of owing something, which in this case is a desire left unpaid. Only if we obtain what we want is this debt paid off. If what we need is scarce, it's challenging to get and easy to lose because everyone wants it. In our experience, then, happiness is in short supply. The burden of high expectations. Suppose we let our life satisfaction depend on things challenging to obtain. In that case, we set ourselves up for stress, discontent, and insecurity. We tend to worry a lot about not having what we want, losing what we have, and the future not playing out as we desire. A much better alternative would be a minimalist mindset of abundance. If we experience no shortage in getting our needs met, we'll quickly achieve a state of contentment. And the quickest way to reach abundance is by downgrading our needs. The less you want, the more you have. And when we have plenty, we care less about gain and loss. We're less stressed about missing out and less fearful of change. The minimalist mindset. This video delves into the benefits of being satisfied with little, how this leads to a more carefree life, and how we can experience abundance instead of scarcity through a minimalist mindset. When happiness is in short supply, we need to work hard to obtain it. The requirements for happiness we've decided for ourselves could be material possessions, money, high social status, a near-perfect partner, or perhaps a combination of these factors. Imagine slaving away endlessly to meet these requirements while continually experiencing this nagging sense of dissatisfaction. Imagine that when we finally obtain our holy grail, we anxiously hold on to it, as losing what we've worked so hard for would mean the end of our happiness. What a demanding life that would be. The power of moderation. The more specific our conditions for happiness are, the more difficult it becomes to be satisfied, especially when we've made our happiness dependent on outside circumstances that are incredibly fickle. The backwards law shows us, the more we need to be satisfied, the less satisfied we become. And the more we want, the less we feel we have. So the less we need from the world, the more we'll experience abundance. Abundance implies that we have more than enough. But what's enough? That's subjective. For some, it's never enough. For others, very little is enough. Also, our idea of what's enough tends to change over time. Epicurus distinguished 3 kinds of desires: natural and necessary desires, natural and unnecessary desires, and vain desires. In short, Epicurus believed that we should focus on the first and avoid the latter. However, this also leaves a vast gray area of needs that, in the modern world, aren't necessary for happiness, but still abundant and thus easy to obtain. Being thankful for what we have. Humans tend to focus on what they want rather than on what they have. But doing so means we exchange potential sources of contentment for unfulfilled desires, and the pain that comes with that. The things we have form a very accessible source of joy. Is there anything easier to obtain than what we already have? When we fail to cherish what we have, we'll be dissatisfied. But if we turn away from what we don't have and start focusing on what we do have, happiness will be a bargain. Being grateful for what we have increases the value of what we have. Contemplating the price of our needs. Our needs come with a price. In general, what's abundant is cheap, and what's scarce is expensive, and it's easier to acquire something affordable than something lavish. The American philosopher Henry David Thoreau had a simple rule for this: The price of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it. Whenever we desire something, we could immediately ask ourselves, what amount of life will I exchange for this? How many hours of work does this purchase require of me? And how much does this work affect my health? Staying out of long-term debt. Being in debt can be a very stressful experience, as an obligation to pay off what we owe shackles us. Our desires also generate debt to one of the most tormenting, nagging, demanding creditors we can think of, the mind. Real difficulties start when we immerse ourselves in long-term desires that we must fulfill to feel satisfied. By doing this, we burden ourselves with long-term debt, a feeling of lack that only goes away when this desire is fulfilled, which can leave us feeling incomplete for a long time. Ultimately, there are two ways of creating abundance. The first one is by accumulating more of what we desire, but by doing so, we become dependent on outside circumstances that we cannot control. The second one is by putting a chain on our desires, so we make the things that are already here, in the present, more satisfying to us. The less we desire from the world, the more abundant the world appears. Thus, the less you want, the more you have. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to help spread philosophical wisdom. Embrace minimalism and discover the abundance in simplicity.